Okay, Richard, you're on.
You got some clanking in the background there.
Welcome to today's debate. Our subject today is anarchism versus limited government. Hello, my name is Richard Honeywell. I am the moderator for today's debate. My role as moderator is to enforce the rules of the debate in order to allow the truth to have the best chance of prevailing. And we do this by asking each of the participants to engage as much as possible in fairness and rationality. The motion today is anarchism is the best system to optimally protect individual rights. Now, incidentally, this is the second time these two debaters have debated this issue. So it's going to be very interesting to see the two of them duke it out in round two. Arguing in the affirmative is Victor Pross. Victor is a Vancouver-based caricature artist who is also the host of Prosscast. That's Prosscast. He is the founder of The Real Sons of Anarchy, which hosts high-profile libertarian speakers. Victor is the subject also of a documentary film based upon his art. The movie is called Pop Goes the Culture and is based on his book of the same name. To repeat, the motion today is anarchy is the best system to optimally protect individual rights. Arguing in the negative is Jan Helfeld. Jan is an independent journalist, a former television show host, and avid debater. He employs the Socratic method of questioning in his interviews to reveal contradictions in the minds of politicians and journalists. Politicians such as Nancy Pelosi, John McCain, Joe Biden, and Harry Reid. And he's also interviewed prominent journalists such as Chris Matthews, George Stephanopoulos, and Lou Dobbs. Jan's purpose in conducting his interviews is to defend the individual rights of citizens and to promote a limited government. We will begin with each participant having 10 minutes to present his case. And we will begin with the debater in the affirmative, Victor Pross.
Okay, very good. Thanks, gentlemen. Okay, just to get into it, the fundamental debate of the modern era, generally speaking, especially pertaining to this subject, is a continuing clash between the ideas of two philosophers that I have in mind, two philosophers, John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. Now let's consider some of the battle lines there that have significance to today's conversation. For Hobbes, human beings are inherently vicious and left to their own devices will live, if they live without society, as he puts it, that is, according to Hobbes, it's a pre-government or a state of nature, as he called it, which means without society, which means as a consequence, a war of all against all. He just immediately asserts that position. We're just to take it as an axiom. And that's what he describes as a state of nature. Now, it's because of philosophers like Hobbes who had poisoned the well so thoroughly of considering a free society as viable that when people encounter anarchist ideas, they are alarmed at the specter of human nature. Should it be let loose of any restraints, and which otherwise would be curtailed and curbed by the state. Now, human nature is always presented as something inherently wretched, inherently, intrinsically wretched, and the state is a parental authority set to prevent its citizens from running out in the middle of the road, which we wouldn't have because there would be no roads in an anarchist society, apparently, right? And to prevent the citizenry from sticking forks into a toaster. You see, it's kind of like a nanny state concept here that's going on. This is like the origin of the nanny state, I think, in Thomas Hobbes, not just limited to him. Now, as Hobbes, his most famous phrase puts it, man's life in a state of nature, in a state of freedom, that is, would be solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. And so fortunately, the state relieves mankind of this unpleasant condition. You see, by curbing and taming man's evil tendencies and enforcing society in cooperation. Obviously, the origin of the state in this case is not a matter of consent. It's a matter of social utility, and that's what was first and foremost in Hobbes' mind: social utility. Now, in this vision, the state is inherently good and just, even if it's oppressive. Even if it's oppressive, it's still just and good. And the government does not make its subjects' lives as terrible as it would be if the state did not exist. And that's the justification that he put forth. In other words, anything is better than anarchy. Once he's poisoned the well, that anarchy would be a catastrophic, cataclysmic of disaster of enormous portions. That's absolutely would boggle and staggle the imagination, is the images that's being presented here. So a government, it doesn't matter how despotic or tyrannical it could become, it's way better than having an anarchist state. That's the premises from which he's arguing from. Now we have John Locke, on the other hand. Now John Locke is a great exponent of freedom. The objectivists and a lot of liberty lovers are indebted to John Locke. I think that Jan would agree with me on that one. Locke takes a much more optimistic view of human nature. People may not be perfect, but they have a great capacity for decency and are inclined to choose good rather than evil. Entirely different bases being presented here in this state of nature. That both philosophers are coming from a state of nature, but they have entirely different views of human nature. Locke's state of nature, unlike Hobbes, is essentially peaceful and it's civilized. People can exercise their mutual freedom in an anarchistic society without necessarily lapsing into a state of war, because they are able, through the use of their reason, to discern the many benefits of social cooperation. And obviously Rand picks up from here as well that the individual mind, there's no group thing, it's the individual mind that has to grasp reality. And Hobbes is coming at it from that perspective as well. Now, a government, according to Hobbes, is constituted in the Lockean way by and for the people. There's a very famous phrase, of course. Locke is pretty much is extremely instrumental in the American Revolution. So it's a government set up by and for the people, and only such a government is justified if it develops out of the voluntary choice of the people. Otherwise, like, forget about it. If consent is not a matter of it, then it's just the so-called government or rulers or government officials become indistinguishable from street thugs and warlords then, if you do not have the consent of the people. So the most significant thing about Locke's anarchistic state of nature is that it is pre-political, that's true, but it's not pre-social. Okay, is where Hobbes is coming from. On the other hand, of course, it's the government that brings society. It's not like society that existed previous to that. Now, it can't be stressed enough how revolutionary Locke's ideas were. It might kind of sound like very commonsensical and palatable now, but we have to understand just how revolutionary these ideas were. He did uphold natural rights, government by consent, the right to resist unjust laws, the right to overthrow tyrannical governments. We see that with the American Revolution. All this is spearheaded by the philosophy of Locke. Many 18th century writers, however, though, that doesn't mean he didn't go without his criticisms. Many 19th century writers, such as Joshua Tucker, pointed to John Locke as the principal architect of the ideas that were instrumental in the American Revolution. And it pertains to political theory. The doctrine of natural equality means that no person has a natural right to rule over others. Okay, that's the crucial thing here. No person has a natural right to rule over others. That would mean that that person would have an exclusive monopoly, or peoples, not just person, would have an exclusive monopoly on morality that is denied to other human beings. How am I doing for time there? Okay, I'll continue on. Now, modern collectivists, they see society as a superorganism, as some kind of like supernatural entity apart from and superior to the sum of the individual members, as Rand would say. This is the metaphysical root of statism, of course. So once you deny equal rights that it applies to all people, including those individuals who consider themselves legislators and rulers, if the principle is not universal, then it's not a principle. It's just a matter of tyranny. That's all it comes down to. A government is an institution that holds the exclusive power to enforce certain rules of social conduct in a given area. And that's one of the clashes that I think that any mode of government, no matter if we're talking about welfare statism, democracy, or a Republican, or Nazi Germany, or communism, one thing that unifies all governments together without consent is that of violating individual rights. Necessarily violates individual rights. How does this institution retain its monopoly, and how does it fund and support itself? Through taxation, through the use of force. And if you do not have force at the epicenter of this institution, that it's not a government. And that's why this ridiculousness claim that DROs represents a multitude of governments is missing the point. No, the crucial thing that separates DROs, or defense resolution organizations, from governments is the voluntary nature that John Locke described in his state of nature, so-called state of nature.
Victor,
now
you have 1 minute left.
1 minute left. Okay, right. Yeah. So the state can never be the protector of individual rights, given that the centralized nature of the institution is that of a perpetual rights violator. There is no consent. It's an entirely arbitrary construct that's stamped on a government, but does not necessarily speak to the actual nature of the institution.
Thank you, Victor. Once again, the motion is anarchism is the best system to optimally protect individual rights. Arguing in the negative is Jan Helfeld. Jan, you have 10 minutes.
Yes, before I start my 10 minutes, it's not necessary to warn us if we're getting close, so you don't interrupt his thought. Just whenever we get to 10 minutes, your time's up, we wrap up if that's okay.
Got it.
Well, Victor, thank you for doing round 2. I appreciate that. I think sometimes you need to do 2 rounds to get to the truth.
And you weren't feeling too well.
And I wasn't feeling too well. Not feeling that good today either. Anyway, let me say that I, as many anarchists, are very angry about the policies that the government has today. I'm not advocating that government. I'm advocating limited government. But what I want to warn anarchists is, don't be so angry that you can't think straight, because you have to be able to project what are the consequences of anarchism. And one of your leaders, J.T. Tucker, thinks that's not necessary, that things can't be worse. And that is the biggest mistake that the people in Cuba made when they got rid of their dictator, where the people in China got rid of their dictator and took Mao Zedong. Things can almost always be worse. So you have to project what the consequences are of having an anarchist situation or social organization or whatever you want to call it. So I'm here to specify what are all of these negative consequences. One more thing that you need to know is that in political theory discussions, and I think Victor and I agree on this, it's a matter of trying to approximate a goal, an optimal goal. He thinks the optimal goal is anarchism. I think it's a limited government. But that's what it's about. So the closer you are to limited government, the better it is. It's not that it has to be completely limited or completely anarchistic, I would say also. It's if you approximate that go more, then I claim that if you approximate limited government more, it's better for you. Your rights will be more optimally protected. That's what I'm arguing here. So, in order to have the optimal possibility of a happy life, I would say a long, happy, satisfied life, you need a government, but one that is limited to protecting the individual rights of the citizens. This is essentially what the Declaration of Independence said, and I agree. It says to secure these rights, governments are instituted. The closer we are to this model, the more protected we will be, and anarchism destroys optimal protection of your rights. Let's see why. Anarchism creates two classes of citizens, those with firepower and those without. It is the law of the jungle, a state of nature where predation prevails. If you have a dispute with the owner of a security agency, you have to kowtow to his wishes, and you will not be able to force him to do anything because he has the firepower and you don't. If there is one agency that just has a cheap enrollment, they only do arbitration, they have a couple of policemen, that agency, that security agency, will have to kowtow to those security agencies that have armies, that have military hardware. It's the law of the jungle. When the cheetah kills a deer or whatever, antelope, and the lion comes, the cheetah has to run. And that's the way it will be in anarchism. The weaker people militarily will have to kowtow to the stronger ones. And you all that are watching this will probably be in the weaker version group. No matter how many rifles or guns or machine guns you have, they will never be a match for tanks, attack helicopters, attack drones, etc. Military hardware. That's what will make the difference in the force power that each organization has. The second point that I want to make is there can be no justice if there is no written law. You have to know what the law is before you take the action in order to have a fair system. It's quite obvious. I don't see why this isn't clear to everyone. If everything is up for grabs and it's going to be decided in arbitration, you have no idea what will be legal and what won't. Look, in order to have your rights optimally protected and not run afoul the law, you need to know what the law is. Like I said, you need objective law written down. Under anarchism, there would be hundreds of different kinds of legal systems with thousands of variations. Some agencies would be based on common law, other on Roman law, other on Sharia law, other on environmental law, white power, black power, Texas law, you name it, Mormon law. And then all of these laws will have a number of variations in every aspect of the law. There would be different criminal law, different civil procedure, different inheritance law, different tort law, and there will be arguments and discussions about all of these things. All that has to happen is that a few of these disputes have to be resolved with physical force, and you have opposing security agencies going to war with each other. Let me give you an example that I've given before. In some jurisdictions in the United States, if you have voluntary sex with a woman under 18, it is statutory rape. In others, it is not, because you can have legal sex, voluntary sex with a woman over 16. You need to know which law is going to apply to you before you make your decision, and you have no way of knowing. The anarchist says, no problem, the difference will be resolved in arbitration. However, how do you arbitrate between going to jail for 10 years and not going at all. There is no happy medium. There is no owner of any security agency that advocates the 16-year-old cutoff age that is going to go to jail for 10 years or 5 or even 1 year. When he understood that the legal-based age limit in his legal system was 16 under his security agency. So arbitration is a mirage. It appears to offer fair and just results, but it's impossible for it to be fair because you do not know what the law is before you take the action. Now, some defense agencies will resort to force and fight, either other defense or security agencies or criminal gangs that they have disputes with. Now, if two security agencies go to war and fight, you have a mini war in the United States. And you don't need too many of these wars to draw in other agencies, other alliances, and have tanks in the street. And that's what I don't want. I don't want to have tanks in my street. I don't have them now. And under limited government, it would be even less government intervention than now. So there's even less reason to take a gamble. The premises for my conclusion that you probably have heard, because I've put all of this in my extended remarks in almost every debate and interview with an anarchist. And guess what? Nobody answers which premises that I put forth they disagree with. So we can never know where we part company. I'm trying to do that in this debate, but here. The premises for my conclusion that there would be an increase in criminality, that's one of my conclusions under anarchism, is there will always be people that choose predation. By the way, Victor agrees with that. They prefer to pick on the weakest links to victims, those individuals that are not protected by defense agencies that used to be protected by the state. And they are easy victims. Thus, more crime under that situation than under now or under limited government. Because it's an incentive for predators because they can pick off weak people that are not associated and not defended, or security agencies that don't have firepower.
Thank you, Jan. Your time is up.
Okay, I'm going to take 2 minutes. Can I take an extra 2 minutes?
Yes, you may.
When there is a central agency, excuse me, a central government, there is no incentive for criminal gangs to acquire tanks, guided missiles, or drones, because that just makes it easier for them to be caught. And they do not increase their pool of victims by having these weapons. However, once the state is removed, every investment in military hardware increases the amount of potential victims, easy to extort money from them. In the previous debate, I discussed with Victor the contradictions that were in his view on NAP. First, contradictions, then evasion. Victor says that he would not violate NAP even if he had to die. That's what he first said. He would prefer to die rather than violate somebody else's rights, i.e. initiate physical force. Then, when I show him that the way he holds the NAP principle goes against his ultimate value, which is the same as mine, his life, he changes his mind and says he would not initiate force to save his life. Excuse me, that he would initiate force to save his life. Uncomfortable with that position, he says that because he does not intend to violate the other person's rights, it is not really a violation of the rights. Of course, this is nonsense. Still not satisfied and admitting that it is a violation of the rights, even if he doesn't intend to do so, he goes to the next defense and says that under extreme duress, he doesn't really know what he is going to do, so it's not really a violation of the other person's rights, even if he initiates force. this is just another way of evading the fact that he is violating their rights. Finally, he says he doesn't know what he would do. I mean, he's all over. And why do I do this? Because every time I interview an anarchist, they have contradictions in their thinking because they haven't integrated their ethics. And so they don't know the relationship between this principle of NAP, not initiation of physical force, its context and its relationship to what should be their supreme value, which is optimizing the possibility of a happy life. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you, Victor. Now we enter into the question side of the debate. Each participant will be allowed 10 questions to cross-examine the other side. Each question is limited to 20 seconds, and each response is limited to 1 minute. You will each have 2 minutes for rebuttal. And just to reiterate what Jan said, you will each be allowed 3 2-minute extensions of time. Jan has already used 1. So, Jan, you will begin. What is your question?
No, the affirmative has to begin with the questions.
Okay. Victor, what is your question for the negative?
Okay, very good. Yeah. in regards to the ethical conundrums and the sophomore philosophy students 101 eating pizza in a dorm type of questions of lifeboat scenarios and things like that, I think that my position's been mischaracterized, but maybe we'll get into that. I really don't. I agree with Ayn Rand that what she wrote in a chapter in The Virtue of Selflessness, Emergency Ethics, that these ready-made conundrums.
Excuse me, Victor, you're supposed to ask a question, not argue your case. You can do that in refutation.
Okay, no, very good, very good. Okay, now how would you define individual rights, and by what means can rights be violated? First of all, how would you define it? And if you can give a couple of examples of what it means to violate rights. And examples of what constitutes not the violation of rights, for that matter, because there's a lot of different divergent ideas of what rights are.
You've taken about 2 minutes or 1 minute at least. Anyway,
sorry about that, Jan.
You give me the same latitude when I ask a question, I hope.
Okay. No, Jan, if you want, when you ask me a question, if it takes more than a 30-second snapshot to make sure I understand the question, I would prefer that. Go ahead. How do you define individual rights?
Individual rights are moral principles that permit you to know when an action is proper and when it is improper in a social context. They can only be violated by force or fraud. The whole purpose of individual rights is to protect the individual judgment of the citizen. And so it permits you to tell, it's a bridge between ethics and political theory. Permits you to tell when a state is acting improperly. It's acting properly when it's a limited government and it's limiting its actions to the protection of individual rights of the citizens. And it's not invading other countries or criminalizing victimless crimes or redistributing the citizens' wealth. Those would all be violations of individual rights and against limited government. And that's why I constantly talk against them.
Thank you, Jan. And your question back to Victor.
Do you have a question for me, or do I just continue on with more questions?
You have to ask your 10 questions.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I think I know the format better than the moderator. That's okay.
Yeah, you do.
I studied. I crammed overnight, you see.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, no, very good. I definitely agree with you in regards to individual rights. They can only be violated by physical force constituting rape, theft, fraud, indirect use of force, and the like. Now, having recognized that, do you agree with Rand's idea of voluntary taxation or voluntary contributions to the government, if people don't like the word taxation, if that sounds like an oxymoron to some people. Do you agree with Rand's ideas of voluntary contributions to the government based on the premise that taxation violates rights?
Rand said that it was a tough nut to crack, and she didn't have the answer, and she was going to leave it to someone else because she had answered enough things. But I don't think it's so tough. I'm going to crack the nut for you easily. If you hire a security guard or a society together hire an institution called the government to perform a specific function, which is protecting your individual rights, then you have to be willing to pay for it. And the way you pay for it is through taxes. If the taxes are limited to the expenses necessary in order to protect your individual rights, they aren't violating anybody's rights, and they're doing what they should. So I don't see such a big quandary. And by the way, the others, the other suggestions that are offered are no good. Go ahead.
Third question, Victor.
Third question. Okay. Yeah. Well, the perhaps I'd like some further clarification.
And incidentally, you have the option at any time.
What's that?
You have the option of rebuttal.
No. Unless he wants to use an extension. If he wants to use an extension, he can say anytime it's his turn, he can talk.
Okay.
Okay.
But right now, you're supposed to ask your third question.
Third question. Okay.
Victor?
Okay. Yeah. So we're still on the question period then.
Yes. 10 questions. Then I do 10 questions.
10 questions in a row. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Now, point of clarification. In regards to the this whole idea of a social contract and paying for services rendered. Of course, that speaks to the free market. But the clarification question I'm asking here is that, of course, you should pay for services that are rendered, but you have to agree to those services, and you have to know in advance what the terms and conditions and the expense is going to be for the services that you require and that you voluntarily want to take on. Now, if you say that taxation is not theft, as the famous meme slogan goes, does that mean that a government that holds an exclusive monopoly on power they themselves set the terms and the conditions and the price, and they can increase that price at will as they see fit? And hey, you're utilizing the services, so you'll pay for it, but we'll decide what the terms and conditions of the services are.
Victor, you're arguing your point, and you've asked 3 questions in one.
Oh, that's a question. That's a question.
What's the question? I mean, you asked this 3 questions already, and I'm getting ready to answer one, but then you go to the next question, and then you make an argument, and then you go to the next question.
Agree that a proper contract calls for the terms and conditions to be agreed upon in advance.
Okay.
All the parties involved, and the price is set in advance. You don't change the price somewhere down the line. Do you agree with that? That's the nature of an actual contract.
I agree that the social contract that was agreed to create the limited government was that we would create a government that's function would be limited to protecting the individual rights of the citizens, and that everything else was off limits, and that those expenditures that were necessary for that function could be collected through taxes. And there's no problem with that, because this is what was consented to, and nobody was arguing for no government. All the people that were in the United States at the time either believed in a limited government or monarchy, but none of them were advocating something else. And part of the contract is that you will decide, I'm willing to have the decision of how much you spend on those proper functions.
Time's up.
For democratic control and democratic.
Victor, your
okay, yeah,
question.
okay, very good. Okay, now the fourth question: what is to prevent a dissatisfied customer of this government service, what is to prevent a dissatisfied customer in full possession of his individual rights from withholding his money, his voluntary contributions from a Randian kind of government, while subscribing instead to the services of another agency? Does he have that right?
Well, okay, let me answer your question, because you just go.
That's the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. The question is, there's two parts of this question, I think, but let me answer at least one. You can hire a security agency if you want extra, but you cannot have major police power, because then you would have the potential for a conflict between the government and this security agency with military firepower. And so you don't want to have that. And to avoid that, that's why you give a monopoly of legal force to the government. And that's basically the situation, which is every 2 years and 4 years reaffirmed democratically, and which all the immigrants that came to the United States accepted when they came. They knew it was going to be like that, and so they accepted it. Now, if somebody changes their mind, or people like yourself now don't want to have this, don't want to be, they say this contract's no good, I'm better off with no government. I'm all in favor. Go ahead. Well, I'm all in favor of them having a right to buy up property at some coastline and secede and try their anarchist experiment.
Yeah.
Thank you. Victor, your next question.
Yeah. Okay. Now, the state is vested with the exclusive power, something that they've appointed to themselves. You don't have any choice about that, but the state is vested with the exclusive power to adjudicate legal disputes and therefore laws, etc., while forcibly preventing other individuals and associations from engaging in the same activities. We're not talking about running amok. We're talking about providing the same services that this legitimate government is.
And your question, Victor, is because
yeah. He's always arguing every time this is a violation of the rules, Victor.
Sure about that. Okay, now would you say that to prevent other people from engaging in the same activities and services that the government is that to prevent them from doing that necessarily violates their rights?
No, and in fact, the government doesn't prevent private arbitrators from operating, and my father was one, as well as a law professor. So that's okay. The thing is that arbitration doesn't work unless there is a state, somebody to implement it, to enforce it. And that's why you need a government. Now, as I said before, you can't have military firepower that competes with the government, because then you have the risk of a war between these agencies and the government. And that's what you're trying to avoid. You sacrifice that in terms of getting what you want, which is peace and tranquility, and you have your elections to confirm the consent of the governed periodically on every level, federal, state, and every other level. So,
time's up.
Okay.
Victor,
Well, yeah. Okay. Now you spoke of this. Now you spoke of like clashing laws and mayhem and unfolding in an anarchist, decentralized state. But you do have the decentralization of the American Revolution. You do have different states with different laws. Don't you think? Would you call for a world government to prevent the same kind of chaos when you have different a world of?
Wait a second. You're asking two different questions here. One is,
if they're two different
problem
questions,
with decentralization. That's your first question. There isn't a problem in the United States with different states having different laws and having the federal government with another set of laws. It's very clear that there's a supremacy clause when the federal government's law clashes with the state law succumbs to the federal law. And the areas that are supposed to be federal law are defined in the Constitution. The rest of them are left up to the states, so-called police power. Almost all the laws which you have to abide by are supposed to be state laws. Now, there's been some erosion on this, and that's a problem. But there isn't any issue in the United States about which law applies and their conflicting laws. That doesn't occur.
There's a unifying body, then, is there?
Well, that's another question. Am I in favor of a world government? No, that's a third question, sixth question. No, I'm against a world government.
Why? If we had this objective,
why? If you want, I'll tell you why.
I'll clarify the question before you answer. Hold it. If we're not just talking about any government, we're talking about the Randian model of government. Why should that not be a world government? Would you not endorse such an idea? Forget about the practicality or feasibility of it. Morally, would you embrace that idea?
Well, first of all, we aren't even close to having any world government. Secondly, if we did, it wouldn't be a Randian government.
You approve of this idea?
And thirdly, even if it was momentarily, which is basically preposterous or unlikely, the problem is that it might change. So it's always good to have options to flee to, and that's why I'm in favor of the nation states and would give the citizens the opportunity to get the hell out of extreme tyranny, which apparently anarchists don't fear, and they think it's no problem. They haven't lived under extreme tyranny, and then they would know the truth.
Next question.
Yeah, we would know the truth of statism in action.
Right. That they don't really know what, and they can't differentiate in the various degrees that there are of abuse.
Okay.
So things can get much worse than they are in the United States right now, and they can get better if we went back to limited government.
I know that Thomas Hobbes would agree with you, but let me ask you though,
Thomas Hobbes? I'll answer it, but
that's not a question.
I agree with Thomas Hobbes that without a government, life is going to be nasty, short, and brutish. I don't agree with Thomas Hobbes, as I've said several times, that your only choice is to choose a statist, tyrannical government. There is another option, the one that I'm putting forth in this debate, which is limited government, the one that the United States started and gave an inkling as to how it would work, expanding rights to a very large segment of the population and creating a rather limited government to do so. And this permitted freedom to flourish and people to grasp the principle involved and to get a glimpse of what limited government would look like.
Time.
Okay, well, let me ask my how many questions do I have left, Mr. Moderator?
You have three more questions.
Okay, now let me ask you this then, Jan.
How many did you count? I have 9 already.
Well, the two
we'll go by the moderator's rules. If he says
okay. How many did the moderator say?
Right.
I'll probably cut it shorter than 10.
Go ahead.
Okay.
What?
There's 2 to it. Yes, no.
Okay, we're good now. I got 3 more. Okay, so now this pre-state of this natural law of nature, where things would be nasty, brutish, and short. Is it not the case, though, that the American form of government is by and for the people, and that they voluntarily agreed to a government based on their reasoning and their rational self-interest, that we need a government here for social utility, so we're rational and we're smart enough, and moral enough to recognize that? Doesn't that kind of like presuppose more to the side of Locke than Hobbes?
It's a Hobbesian choice. You don't have to choose between no government and extreme tyrannical government, which is what Hobbes advocated. I've said several times, I advocate limited government, and that Hobbes did not. So I disagree with him on that. And so that's what I'm defending in this debate. Limited government as the optimum, where your rights are optimally protected, more so than under anarchism. And I've given some of the reasons, and you can see the rest of them in my extended remarks.
Okay, Richard, I don't think he I don't think he understood my question. I don't feel that my question was answered.
Okay.
What is it? Did you ask a yes or no question, Victor?
No, I would actually, you can answer yes or no, but I welcome an extended answer, though, not just limited to one answer. I just think you misunderstood.
What is it that I didn't answer?
What? Excuse me, let me interrupt. Why don't you repose the question, Victor, as concisely as possible?
Okay, yeah, very good. Okay, no, the question, I wasn't asking about a dichotomy or a choice between brand A or brand B. I'm simply asking a very simple question. This is that the state of nature that Hobbes has presented as being like a cataclysmic hellhole, how is it that people there at some point become rational and moral enough to realize, hey, we need a government for social utility? I made it very clear the difference between Locke and Hobbes.
The question, not the statement. A question, please.
Okay. Why? How is it that in a pre-political and just social setting, such as the state of nature, how is it that zombie killing anarchists chewing off the heads of chickens all of a sudden become rational and realize, hey, we need a government? How is it that you transfer from one to the other, where they all of a sudden they realize that we need a government? How did they go from a Hobbesian hellhole to rationality of calling on a limited government for social utility?
Are you asking how they went from no government to some government in their mind? Is that what you're asking? Or are you asking how they went from advocating a tyrannical government to a John Lockean type government? Is that
look at nasty?
Are you asking?
Look at nasty, brutish, and short means the human beings are completely out of their freaking minds. They can't get anything together. It's completely social chaos. Anarchy is a synonym for chaos. How do they go from that?
You're arguing. You're constantly arguing.
No. The question is, how do they get to limited government? How do they get to limited government from that state?
I answered your question twice in the same answer that I answered originally. There isn't any conflict between advocating a limited government and believing that if you have no government, you're going to have a nasty, brutish, short life. And of course, there were governments before Hobbes wrote anything. And so people had experience about governments. And the great thing about Locke was that he advocated in his book, The Rights of Man, to limit the power of the government, and that human beings' rights and individual rights should be respected, and that is what the government should do. And it wasn't doing that with the monarchy that the American colonialists threw off those chains when they had their War of Independence.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, one more question, Victor.
Okay, do you agree with the idea that there should be a complete separation of government and economics that Rand spoke of, just in the same sense that we have a separation of church and state? Do you agree with that? That we can have competing currencies, in fact, and that the government is to have absolutely nothing to do with the economic life of individuals. There could be a complete.
You've asked a few questions at the same time. You asked, should there be a complete separation between economic action and the state?
That would automatically entail competing currencies.
Currency.
Yes, one question.
I'll answer you. Look, as far, both questions, I guess, are related, but they're not the same question. I don't think that the government should control the currency. I think that you should have free and floating competing currencies, and I don't think that the government has any real function. It's not necessary to protect the individual rights of the citizens. In fact, I think it's harmful. So I would advocate people choosing whatever currency they want and not having the government impose their fiat currency. Okay, my turn.
All right. Thank you, Jan. Yes, it's your turn. 10 questions for Mr. Pross.
Let's see if I have some questions here for Victor. Either some security agencies, or DROs, as you want to call them, have nuclear weapons or none do. Let's analyze each case separately. If none had nuclear weapons and Kim Jong-un or Putin or whoever threatened to nuke your city, the one you live in now, Richard, if you didn't pay 10 billion, should you pay?
You're asking the question to Richard?
Should you pay is the question. What would you suggest? What is your preference? Paying or not paying?
Would I pay? You mean that the threat is being directed at me?
Would you say that your city should organize with your security agencies to get that money together and pay the extortion note that is being sent to you?
No, do not compromise with terrorists. That just emboldens them. That you compromise on a fundamental ethical principle like that, that just emboldens them. It's not going to end there. I think we can learn our lessons from Chamberlain and Hitler. Once you try to appease a dictator or would-be dictator, you just embolden them, and then further ransom notes and threats will just manifest. So you cut the evil off, you fight it tooth and nail as best as you can, but you do not submit and give the money.
So you would okay. So you would commit suicide, because if you didn't pay, they would bomb you. And doesn't that conflict with your ultimate value, which is life and having a happy life and long life and satisfied life?
No, because because this society would not be without a military defense. Just because it's an anarchist stateless society doesn't mean. Sorry, what's that? Doesn't mean that there wouldn't be. There's nothing to say, according to libertarian principles. There's nothing there to say that we wouldn't have nuclear armaments or tanks and the like. And in fact, in one of your scenarios, tanks are going up on the lawns of people in an anarchist state. So there is a military might there that's present, and we have to realize that the world can be a dangerous place. But if you're asking me in the question, would we compromise that moral standard? The question is no. We would fight. When it's not a matter of surrendering and die. If we gave the money, that would just embolden these dictators, as I say. That's pacifism that becomes suicidal. No, you fight. You have your airplanes. You have your airplanes, and you have your ships.
Let him finish. Jan, let him finish, please.
Okay.
And at the same time, too, like if you want to talk about like more realistic scenarios, why we would also have allies as well, because if it came to the extent of where you have a dictator like who did you say, the North Korean dude as your example,
or Putin or China, whoever, pick your tyrant that you want, right? Okay, an extortion note, and
I understand.
You would not, so you would use you would send your airplanes and or ships to fight them, and by the time they were in the middle of the Atlantic, they would bomb you.
Finish the question.
Wait a second. Okay,
I heard the question.
That's the premise of my question. Make sure that he is. That's his answer. That he would fight with his conventional weapons, and when they bombed him, he would have had committed suicide. And that conflicts with his ultimate value.
We automatically lost in this conflict then. Okay, well, whatever. No, the principle is
that's what happens when you have anarchism.
No. I'm exercising my right to self-defense. That's the principle that's being put here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you would sacrifice your life.
No, I'm fighting for it.
Because when they bomb you, Richard, you're dead. You
My
understand?
name's Victor, not Richard.
Or your conventional weapons do anything, you're dead. If they send a rocket, hits your city, that's it. And then they will send another.
Fighting a war of self-defense means that I could die. Yes, it doesn't automatically mean that.
You can choose to die, but you have a contradiction, which was my question.
No, I don't.
Choosing to die, if you are threatened with a nuke and you don't have nukes, you cannot retaliate. They will threaten you because it's easy.
Okay, well, we'll agree to disagree.
It contradicts your ultimate value, which is your life. And that is a question that
we'll agree to disagree.
Well, you think it's not a contradiction?
I'm extolling the principle of self-defense.
Oh, well, okay. Next question. If, on the other hand, some DROs have nuclear weapons, would we risk annihilation if there is a dispute between DROs, security agencies, and one of them happened to be headed by a neocon who believed in preemption and first strikes?
Oh, now we have nuclear weapons in this anarchist society.
Yeah, this is the other scenario. Excuse me, let me clarify the question.
Okay.
There's two possibilities, Richard. Victor. It's very simple. Either the DROs and the security agencies have nuclear weapons or they don't. It's the principle of excluded middle. Either they do or they don't. And I, for clarity's sake, am analyzing both possibilities. Let's go to the other possibility I just asked you. I asked you if they do have nuclear weapons.
Okay, now we have nuclear weapons. Okay.
Do you risk nuclear attack within your country?
I'm not sure if I understand the question. Are you talking about one DRO agency threatening another agency for extortion?
No, not extortion. They just have a very important difference, and they're not going to cave, and they're trigger happy like the neocons are, and they believe in, well, we'll knock them out before they strike us first, and we'll win this controversy. And Vancouver or British Columbia, wherever you are, bingo.
What would the nature of the conflict?
You want to take that risk? There is this risk, and you're willing to take it? Is that correct?
Well, you set up as a risk, and you're asking me, what risk are you talking about? Maybe I don't understand the question. What's the conflict?
The risk of having nuclear war inside your country.
It's preposterous. No DRO as a business practice, as their modus operandi, their mission statement as a business will not be, hey, so we can get a larger snare of profits, we're going to knock out these other DRO agencies so we can reap the whirlwind of greater profits now that we have less competition. So we're just going to nuke the other guys out of existence. It's preposterous. No,
Are you arguing that this is not possible? That it's not possible for somebody that has nukes to push the button and do a first strike? Are you arguing that?
Physically impossible? That's not impossible. It
is possible. So then answer the question.
I am answering the question.
No, you're saying that it's implausible, that it won't happen. It's not possible.
It's implausible.
You are questioning my premise that this can happen. And obviously it can happen, because whenever anybody has nuclear power, the button can be pushed. We all know that. But you're saying that's
physically, but it's not going to happen though. No DRO agency that sets up an agency. The whole point of a DRO agency is a dispute resolution organization. That's the whole hub of the concept, is to reduce conflict, not to increase them. That's the very idea. Now, as a business model, that's not going to be done. Is somebody who's like absolutely mentally deranged? You have that same kind of danger lurking when you have governments. But you're not advocating no governments. We do live in a modern world that the entire globe is circled with governments that do have nuclear warfare. but we don't see people dropping nuclear bombs at the drop of a hat. Even if you have madmen like the North Korean little psycho midget there, has not arbitrarily from left field, that is crazy and insane, as despotic as he is, has not dropped nuclear bombs, because he knows evil doesn't mean that you're stupid. He knows that that would be met with very swift retaliation, not only from the American government but by allies, and that it would alert the world over that this guy absolutely has to be stopped, and that would be the end of it. And just like the DRO agency, in a Western hemisphere where you have a guy operating a business to launch a nuclear war within his country would be the death of that individual. And
it cannot happen. It cannot happen now because
you're debating me. Ask the questions.
Of course it cannot happen now because we don't have the nuclear weapon. Different people in the same country. It's true that you can. You run the risk of foreign tyrants.
I'm sorry you don't like my answer, but it was answered.
Jan,
okay.
Let's get back to some structure here, Jan.
Okay. Do you think criminal gangs will extort money from weak individuals that are not organized, as well as security agencies they consider weaker than themselves, especially considering that these criminal gangs can now have military hardware?
Weaker individuals? I'm not sure what
would you repeat the question precisely?
It means people that are not organized, that not belong to any security agency, or security agencies that say, we're not going to fight ever, we're just going to do arbitration, and we'll give you a cheap price. Will criminal gangs extort from these weak individuals that are not organized, as well as security agencies they consider weaker than themselves?
I don't know what weak or disorganized means, but
not organized, when don't have protection from a security agency. How many times I have to explain that?
They have a right to self-defense. And in regards to a microcosm of what an anarchist stateless society would be like, I can't answer every nook and cranny of what this individual who didn't join a DRO or this other weak individual over here, who, whatever weak means, maybe he's mentally incapacitated, maybe he's physically handicapped or whatever. Such an individual would have to rely on voluntary donations, just as Rand had explained herself. The same would go for protection. I can safely say this as a part of my answer is that the people, two sets of different types of people, the people who truly are unable to fend for themselves is necessarily a very small minority of individuals given the population of the earth or the population of a civilization. It's an incredibly small minority. If that was the nature of a human being as such, we would be a species unable to survive. So it necessarily has to be a very small minority. And some people have asked me, well, what about
moderator, I want a ruling on did he answer yes or no to my question?
All right. I think we have to put a stop to certain procedure here. Please, for both participants, be more concise in asking your question so that we can get to the root of these. So let's go all the way back. Jan, you have only 20 seconds. Please ask a 20-second concise question.
And I haven't got the answer, and he talked forever. Do you think criminal gangs will extort money from weak individuals that are not organized, as well as security agencies they consider weaker than themselves? I ask it in 20 seconds. This is not the problem. The problem is he doesn't give a yes or no answer, and I'm asking you forever for a ruling. I would like a ruling on whether he said yes or he said no.
Okay, I'm not going to give that ruling until he answers it now. You have 1 minute, Victor, to answer.
Okay, yeah. In an anarchist society, just like in a state of society, there will be violence. Violence is here to stay. It's part of the human template. That's why we have DRO agencies, is to to minimize the conflict, not to completely eradicate it from the human template and the human psychology altogether. Yes, there will be this gang or this crime of passion or whatnot, but as a organized society, it would be an organized society. Anarchy is not synonymous with chaos. It would be order to take care of people who truly cannot fend for themselves, but also to take care of people if their rights were violated, to see the ultimate protection of those individuals, because it would mean a threat to the society as a whole if we did we did not have any means to take care of issues where conflicts turn to physical violence.
So your answer is yes.
Yeah, yes and no.
That's the problem. That's a contradiction.
No, Jan, in an anarchist society or a limited government society, you have barroom brawls, you have crimes of passion. It's not something that's unique to an anarchist society.
I didn't ask you that. Do you even know what the question was?
Yeah, you're talking about you're talking about a gang picking on some weak people. I answered the question.
I asked you if they would extort money from weak individuals.
I guess that could happen. Absolutely.
As well as security agencies they consider weaker than themselves.
Not a DRO agency. We're talking about a DRO agency. No, that would not be a part of the modus operandi. If you're talking about discrete individuals.
Did you agree before that in the last debate that the criminals prefer to pick off weak victims and attack weak victims and extort from them? The ones they consider weaker than themselves?
That was 2 years ago. You can take my answer now as my answer.
Oh, so you don't believe that anymore? You don't think that criminal, predatory people...
I don't remember my answer.
Jan, we're not arguing the 2-year-old debate. We're arguing the debate today. Please, let's stay on subject.
Well, no, I'm going to repeat what he said last time. Yeah, sure. Previously, in the last debate, you answered yes.
What question?
The question that I just asked, do you think criminal gangs will extort money from weak individuals that are not organized, as well as security agencies they consider weaker than themselves? You said yes. Now in this debate, you said yes and no, and who knows? But that's a contradiction in your thinking. So that's what I was getting at.
That's what you take as a contradiction. Fourth question.
Do you think some of these security agencies will fight back and create a little war?
No.
Okay. So if you are a weaker security agency and just has a couple of policemen and you're facing a criminal gang that has military firepower, attack helicopters, tanks, etc., you would say that they would fight back. They would not fight back, or what is it that they would do? Okay, previously you had said that you were willing to take a chance with suicide. And if they sent you a note,
you want to answer my question?
Even if you had less power or you didn't have nukes. But now you say that these security agencies will not fight back and not create a little war. So that's a contradiction in your thinking.
No.
Next question.
Forget about this
government.
Wait a minute. There's an opportunity to respond to that.
Yeah. Jan, if you're drawing back to something that you think I might have said that I don't recall 2 years ago, and then contrast that to what I'm saying today as a contradiction, I don't think that's a fair way to debate. Listen to what I'm saying now. And to answer your question, the answer is no. DROs would not engage in warfare with each other. They're businesses. They're not governments.
No, I'm talking about not with each other, with a criminal gang that has military firepower.
Against what? A whole slew, a weak DRO that offers a cheap service, arbitration only,
A couple of cops, and that's it.
No. Deliberately,
They would not fight back.
No, they would not. There would not be a war. I don't grant the.
I'm saying they would fight
war.
back. Would they fight back against the?
Oh, sorry, I misunderstood the question. Yeah, of course they would fight back.
Okay, so then the answer is yes, not no.
And their allies, they would absolutely fight back. If you're talking about domestic criminals, just as you were using your example of foreign criminals, yes, of course, that society would fight back against a necessarily small minority of people who are recognized not as governments but recognized just as thugs. Then yeah, that's the people in that society would fight back, and they would necessarily lose.
Previously, you said these security agencies are not in the business of having wars, or so they don't want to expend money, so they'd rather just go along with it. But
no, I think you're probably thinking of your debate with another anarchist who might have answered that way.
No, it's right there in the question and answer period that I asked last time. When there is a government, criminal gangs are completely outgunned. But if the government is removed, they have a chance to acquire military hardware and outgun some individuals and DROs. Will criminal gangs be incentivized to acquire military hardware so they can prevail over these people and thus have a greater pool of potential victims from which to expropriate wealth by force?
It sounds like the same question. I thought we dealt with this.
No, well, I'm asking that question. Are you going to answer it? Will they be incentivized to acquire military hardware so they can have a greater pool of victims? Yes or no?
DROs?
No. The criminal gangs. Right now, if a criminal gang buys a tank, the government comes in and catches them and puts them all in jail. MS-13 buys a tank, they're dead. If there's no government, they can buy tanks and drones and whatever they want, military attack helicopters. And the question is, are they incentivized to purchase military hardware to increase their pool of potential victims?
Well, I see. Yeah. Well, if they're free to buy this type of weaponry, that would mean that the population as a whole in the society has the same right. So whatever people have deemed appropriate to their self-defense, that type of weaponry would be readily available, and that criminal gang would be outnumbered by people who are fighting for their lives if they felt that they were an imminent threat of this gang member. These gang members, as you just said, are necessarily limited in their numbers, and they would have absolutely no efficacy against thousands of people that would fight back if they felt that their life and property was threatened. Absolutely, they wouldn't have a chance. Would not have a chance.
So to understand your answer, so you think that they're not incentivized to get military firepower to have a greater pool of potential victims. The answer is no. And you also deny that there would be any stragglers or any people or any weak security agencies that could not defend against military hardware, which obviously is the case. There would be of all sorts. So you also deny that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I can expand on the answer to say this, is that you know, Jan, just as well as I do, that all this mass weaponry that we're speaking of has been created by the free market, by which I mean the free market of individuals acting with one another in production and trade, and that all these magical toys of weaponry isn't created by the government. They have usurped and overtaken it, and that's the gang that I'm worried about. That's the gang that's at present that's causing all the havoc in the world. That's starting wars, inflating currency, typing into their bank accounts whatever the hell they want to fund those wars, casting off the debts to the future.
Richard, excuse me.
But you're talking about overwhelming force causing
the argument, and
I'm still in my no. What are you talking about? I'm answering the question.
Which question? Are they incentivized to get military hardware or not? the criminal gangs.
I can't. The question's ridiculous. I can't read the minds of these hypothetical
Not
people.
to answer the question. You think
I'm just my question. My answer to that is that it's not. They would be defeated. It would be futile.
Necessarily.
That's
so you change your mind about there would be stragglers that are not defended.
Are we going back to 2 years ago
Security.
again?
Okay.
Conversation I don't remember.
Okay.
That specific, detailed of conversation.
Under
last question.
You got a memory like a sieve. I have to go back to that now.
Okay.
Listen,
Under anarchism, this is my next question. Under anarchism.
Oh, it's the next question. Okay.
Under anarchism, will people make alliances with people that share their values, like Muslims would make alliances with people that believe in Sharia law, people, Mormon law, Black Power law, White Power law, or sign up with security agencies that ascribe to legal codes they agree with, including security agencies that say, we will back you no matter what. We're not going to any arbitration.
You're talking about a collusion? You're talking about collusion?
No, I'm talking about, will people make alliances with other people that share their values? So the criminals will make alliances with the criminals. The Muslims will make alliances to defend Sharia law. There will be conflicts between the Sharia law and the Mormon law and the Napoleonic Code and common law. And my question is, will people make these alliances with the people that share their values? And will not ascribe, and they don't ascribe to arbitration on every issue.
You're talking about like if we have multiple DROs, that we have some kind of like rampant subjectivism where we have Sharia law and we have environmental law and we have the communists and blah 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 blah. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about whether people will make this kind of alliances based on their common shared values. Like, let's take one example. The Muslims will get together and have alliances and organizations that are dedicated to protecting Sharia law. They will do that, and they will say to their members, look, we don't care what any arbitration says. We are going to follow Sharia law, and we're going to protect you if you follow it, and we will not let them arrest you and punish you. That's the question. Will that happen?
Okay, you know as well as I do, just since we both are cohorts of Ayn Rand. I'm not sure if you know that. I was a former objectivist, and I retain a large degree of her philosophy. Now, you know, this is part of my answer, you know as well as I do that a predominantly rational society, we start with philosophy. If we have a predominantly rational society, the same kind of society that would make an objectivist model of government possible in the first place, that would make it a just government, would be a just rational society where you have a limited government. All of a sudden, you understand that kind of government is dependent upon a society that is predominantly rational. But when it comes to anarchism, all of a sudden that standard is that the rug is taken out from under our feet, and all of a sudden we have this Hobbesian nature, where there's a Hobbesian state of nature, which is ridiculous. In an anarchist society, if a society ever reached a critical mass that reached to that point in time where we have a free society, there would be a homogeneity in the sense of the recognition that natural rights is the thing, and individual rights would be the thing. Something like the Muslim or Islam. Islam is much more than religion. It's statism. Their religious edicts are their laws. And
and I want to know, did he answer yes or no, moderator? Can you tell me, or can you ask him? Is it a yes?
No, I think, Victor, I didn't believe that you answered the question yes or no. So you'll have one more chance very quickly.
He just answer, is it a yes or no to this question? That's all I want to know.
I could not tell if it was.
Okay, so you can't tell, neither can I.
Encapsulate and rephrase.
Victor, you have to say yes or no. It's a yes or no question.
Actually, I can answer the question any way that I want. I don't have to say the words yes or no. I can elaborate. Is not answering a question. How do you prescribe? You have to answer yes or no.
If you're asked a yes or no question, Victor,
what is the question that's
I've asked this question 5 times, and you keep using it to talk about other stuff.
Encapsulate the question.
People make alliances with people that share their values, like
no.
They will not.
No.
The answer is no.
No.
Okay, great.
Not, we're talking about an anarchist society that's
anarchist society, right? And you know that's going to be the case. Fine. And
all right.
Okay, so wait a second. I got to ask another question here.
I answered no and then elaborated.
Okay, well, so yeah, I just want to write down your answer so that we're clear on what the answer is.
Was he asking to elaborate it? Because yes, he certainly can elaborate it if he likes.
No, he already answered. He's elaborated 3 times without answering.
No, I answered. Anyway, I don't agree with the answer, but it's my answer.
Well, okay, so
no, it would not. No.
Okay, will criminal gangs make alliances with other criminal gangs?
You're repeating the question?
No, this is a different question.
Okay, they all sound like the same question, though. Go ahead.
Previously, it was Muslims. These are criminal gangs. Can you see the difference?
Okay, we're going back to North Korea. Go ahead.
No,
street gangs. The Crips. Go ahead.
We're not going back to North Korea. We're talking about domestic.
Go ahead.
Will they make alliances with other criminal gangs to increase their power and firepower so they can overcome and oppose weak victims that do not have protection so they can extort money from them?
That question's already been asked.
They won't. Is that your...
I think you lost count there. Yeah, no.
Okay.
The weak people, etc. I distinctly remember answering that question already. You made a mistake.
Okay, that's the end of the questioning period.
Wait a second, I haven't asked my 10th question or 9th even. Wow.
Well, we have a different.
I have a question here. Is it always morally wrong to initiate physical force against someone else, even under extreme duress? Like, if you were dying of thirst, like you got lost in the forest and there aren't any other people for hundreds of miles around, there's no towns, and you come upon a cabin that has water, and the person that owns the cabin refuses to sell you any, would you initiate force and try to steal some water to save your life?
And just a clarification of the question, does this mean that death is certain unless I get that water?
What'd you say?
For clarification, does this mean that death is absolutely certain if I don't get that water?
Well, it's as certain as you can figure out. You're dying of thirst. You're dying of thirst. You're getting weak. You don't have much energy left, and you need the water desperately. That's the premise.
Yeah, yeah, I would drink the water.
Well, you would steal it, you mean? He doesn't want to sell it to you. He says, no, go get lost. Would you try to steal it in the evening when he wasn't watching or whatever?
If it was an emergency situation, such as this can be multiplied to other examples, such as a lifeboat scenario, hanging from a flagpole that wasn't my property, or breaking into a window by hanging by a flagpole, that would mean certain death if I let go of that lamp pole and break the window. Absolutely, I would drink the water. And Jan, please, it's my time to answer the question. You know, yes, I would drink the water. I would break the window from hanging from a flagpole, etc. But being a responsible moral person, though, I would compensate that individual once my life had been saved. I think you could probably also tell the difference between an absolute extreme asshole and somebody who would file charges, say, well, you violated my property. You know, I think that person would probably look down upon. And I think that minarchists, I think that communists, I think that Democrats, Whatever the political stripe is, I think most people would think, gee, that guy's an asshole. He's pressing charges against that guy. But but absolutely, I would see that it would be right, strictly from a legal precedent, that yeah, you have to compensate that person as a matter of right. I would just think that he was an asshole, but I think that I would compensate that person.
Okay, next question.
Yeah, will some criminal gangs miscalculate, and when they think that somebody isn't protected, or it's a DRO that doesn't have any firepower, attack them, and then find out that actually they have some secret agreement, or they have allies, like you were saying before, and they have a war with the criminal gangs? Doesn't that create a war in your town or country, wherever it happens?
Hey, whatever uprisings of violence and riots or whatever, or barroom fights that take place, it's not something that's this is not what Hobbes was describing in his State of Nature. He wasn't talking about like, well, this conflict can occur and that conflict occur. You know very well that, you know, riots and disagreements and violence erupts even in a limited state government. It's just a part of the template. That's why, as far as you contend, that we need a government is to solve and to settle and these type of conflicts as they do arise. So yeah, these kind of conflicts would arise, but that doesn't mean that the society that's guided by a rational philosophy would not be able to deal with it. We're talking about the real conflict between the anarchist and a statist or limited or small government is that the anarchist is calling for voluntary cooperation among peoples. Is to settle these disputes by voluntary means, not by some monolithic ruling elite that will decide for everybody how they are to interact with each other, on what terms and conditions that they're to interact with each other, because that's where you.
Well, moderator, can you ask Victor to answer the question? Is it a yes or is it a no? Because it's a yes or no question.
Victor, would you answer that, yes or no?
Encapsulate the question one more time.
Oh boy. Then you're going to talk about something else for another minute. Well,
there's no
I
asked
you if will criminal gangs miscalculate, and for that matter, sometimes security agencies, and try to impose their view by force, and you have a little war between the criminal gang and the security agency that's weak, that has just a couple of cops, and who knows what alliances they have and what alliances the criminals have. Wouldn't that create a little war inside your country that you don't have now?
No. Wars are launched by governments, not by discrete individuals.
Okay, that's just a little war. Okay, I'm done.
All right, now okay. Thank you very much, Jan, and thank you for your answers, Victor. Now we're going to enter the summation stage. You each have 2 minutes to articulate a final proffering of your position, and we will begin with Jan.
No,
what are we at right now, sir?
I just finished my questions.
You didn't finish your questions?
I said I just finished my questions, so it's time for Victor to do his refutation.
Okay, very good. Okay, so overall refutation of the discussion as a whole, I guess, is what we're talking about. Okay. Okay. Rand. Sorry, how long do I have in this refutation?
You have 2 minutes, Victor.
2 minutes. Can I exercise? I don't think I've exercised any of my. Can I take my time to answer for? Sorry, what's that?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes, Victor, you can.
So
okay,
you
I can
go for 4 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Now, Rand stated that definitions are the guardians of rationality, and I agree. Let's continue to stress the crucial importance upon proper definitions. What is the essential, fundamental characteristic that separates government from any other social institution? What attribute or distinguishing characteristic unites all governments, not just that government, this government, all governments as a common definition? What's the characteristic that brings them all together, whatever type of government we're talking about? And that would be force. Force. And in this case, initiatory force. The term government subsumes theocracy, absolute monarchy, Nazism, fascism, democratic socialism, any number of sundry dictatorships, including the conservative libertarian types and their ideas of limited government that also comes under that banner. Otherwise, if force is not a part of it, if initiatory force is not a part of the scenario, it's not a government. It's some other kind of organization. A limited government shares that quality, that trait, with a communist government, holding a monopoly on the exclusive use of force. And how do you hold that monopoly other than by force? How do you maintain and create that monopoly in the first place? Is through via taxation, period. So that means right at the outset, even before we can talk about a government protecting rights, it has founded itself by violating individual rights. That is the contradiction. You cannot square that peg no matter what. It is said that the government's purpose, or the purpose of government, is to protect individual rights, but that's hardly a definition of government. Fascism, socialist regimes are also governments, as I stress. You can't say that they're not governments. They are governments. They follow under that definition. And if we were to ask, how do we define a government from any other type of organization? You have to bring it down to the genus of a concept, and not just the differentia. The genus is force, initiatory force. That's what makes a government. We have with Rand, her political stance, or excuse me, her ethical stance. The basic principle of the objectivist ethics is no man may initiate the use of physical force against other. No man or group or society or government has the right to assume the role of a criminal and initiate the use of physical force or compulsion against others. Now, if this government wants to erect itself, it must do so by voluntary taxation, which is a contradiction in my mind, but Rand says voluntary contributions. If you have this organization, if you want to, let's call it government in the meantime, if it had to rely upon voluntary contributions where it does not interfere in the economic life of people, if it does not interfere by state indoctrination to endear itself, the citizenry to raise a bumper crop of a population that becomes artificially loyal to this institution, which is what the purposes of public schooling is all about. If you didn't have any of that, and people were interacting and trading and volunteering as they will, they have protection services just like they have any other kind of services. All of a sudden, this government just fades. It fades away like mist, like fog just lifts up in a morning that turns to afternoon. If you do not have force at the epicenter of this organization, you do not have a government. You have simply what Locke would describe as a state of nature, where it would be pre-political, but it would not be pre-social.
Okay,
and you would have
Victor.
how long do I have there? Am I on my final minute?
Your time is up right now.
Okay.
My refutation? First of all, the problem with this debate is that Victor evades constantly. I ask him a yes or no question, and he won't answer yes or no. And he's just evading. And that's why we can't get very far. He equivocates on the issue of force. He says that it's the same thing to initiate as not initiate. He says that a government must initiate force. It doesn't have to. In a limited government, the government is not initiating force, as I've said several times. He contradicts himself all over the place. Let's start with Knapp. when I first asked him 2 years ago, he said that he would not violate NAP and he would lose his life. You just heard him say that he would violate NAP. Now, I'm glad that we've had the discussion, because now I'm going to feel responsible for saving Victor's life, so that when he reaches a situation where he's under extreme duress, he's already thought it through, because Jan Helfeld pressed him so much, making those ethical conundrums that he complained so much about. Now, this is the purpose of thinking through your ethics and relating it to your ultimate value, which should be optimizing a happy life. Now, there are plenty of other contradictions here. In his previous answer 2 years ago, he says that when this foreign tyrant threatens to nuke his city if they don't pay the ransom, he would prefer to suicide and fight, even though it's a sure thing that his ships and airplanes can't get there on time or can't prevent the nuke. It's obvious to anybody who values life that when presented with superior force like that, you have to cave. And that's the way it is in the law of the jungle. The weak have to cave. That's the whole point of that. He says that it's not possible for security agencies to press the button preemptively if they have nukes. Of course it's possible, and that's one of the problems that we live under today, and the way we prevent that is through deterrence. So far it's worked. In a previous answer, he would, like, I asked him, do you think some of these security agencies will fight back and create a little war? Previously, he said no. So in this case, he does not prefer suicide. He is just willing to go along with what happens, that they will fight back. Or sometimes he says they will fight back, sometimes they don't. Who knows? What else do I got here? How much time do I have?
You have 48 seconds.
Okay. With regards to the NAP, I went through step by step all his positions. First, he said he would not violate NAP. Then he said he would. Then he said he would violate it, but it wasn't his fault because he didn't intend to. Then he said that he didn't know. Look, in that discussion that I had with him in the other debate took up 45 minutes of evasion to finally get to the truth that he would violate NAP and there's no problem with it. And that's my experience with so many anarchists that have the moral indignation with everybody else that's willing to violate NAP, when in fact they are also willing to violate NAP. But the difference between them and me is that I know when it's right to violate NAP, it's only under extreme duress. And I also know what is the purpose and context of the principle of non-initiation of physical force. It relates to a context where there is a government, and you have to distinguish what actions should be permitted by the government, which not, which actions should be permitted by the citizens and which not. It doesn't apply to free government and anarchism.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Now we'll enter the summation stage. And with the final summation, the affirmative, Victor.
Yeah, how long is the summation?
2 minutes.
Okay. Well, even I was complaining about the issue of taxation. That
and by the way, Victor, you have one more extension available. Jan's used up all of his. You have one more.
I used up all of mine. I only used one. When did I use up the other one? I have two left.
I actually have a question mark for both of you for one. So let's say.
But I have 3 minutes though, do I?
Okay, go ahead.
I'm okay to get
2 minutes.
It doesn't matter to me. He can take an extra minute. It's okay if he, for his
No,
summation.
2 minutes. We each have. I had two. You took one extension. You got more time. Go ahead.
Okay. Now, Ayn Rand opposed coercive taxation on principle because taxation necessarily involves the initiation of force by government, and she proposed some alternatives that would enable government to finance itself by voluntary means. The point is that we're speaking of voluntary means, not where the terms and conditions are set in advance and where the government decides how much you're to pay for the services that in the words of the Godfather, that make you an offer you can't refuse, which is what the terms of the services that they set. It's an offer you can't refuse, and you paying for those so-called services is something else you can't refuse as well, and we'll decide how much that's to be. So Rand saw that as a problem. Jan apparently doesn't. Now, when 19th century minarchist Audubon Herbert advanced his theory of voluntary taxation, he was widely praised by anarchists, such as Benjamin Tucker, embraced him as one of their own. But he was assailed by fellow minarchists, such as Herbert Spencer, who correctly pointed out that Herbert's position was indistinguishable from anarchism, the voluntarism part of it. So even a night watchman state, even the most minimal night watchman state, funded by voluntary donations, if such a thing was possible, would still be coercive. At the very least, it would have to prohibit any competing protection services, which Jan endorses. So that means that would be the initiation of force if they were not permitted to exercise the same services that it's providing that other people also want to be a part of in organizing for themselves. You can have this small minority calling themselves government saying, no, you can't do that. Obviously, that would be a violation of rights. As I said, if the initiation of force is not a part of the equation, it's not government. And for a government to hold its monopoly, it must initiate violent force. And that's why a government, or you want to call it small, you can attach the nice fuzzy sounding adjective small before a government. You can do that if you want, but given the nature of the institution, it necessarily violates rights.
Thank you.
Okay, my turn.
Okay. Your turn.
Yeah, I want to tell the anarchists that are watching this that one of the reasons why I have this debate is because I don't want to see them on the sidelines doing nothing regarding the protection of individual rights, optimizing their protection of individual rights. I would like to see them participate in the public policy discussions. And their way of getting out of that is, well, if it's a law, it's wrong because governments are morally wrong and anything they do is wrong, so they're against it. And that's a lazy person's attitude, and they are on the sidelines. They are not helping change policy or defending their individual rights. Now, a lot of these anarchists, because I've had a lot of discussions with them, think, oh my goodness, limited government is not possible. You can never roll back the time where people believe more in limited government. Look, right now, there's probably around 20% people that are libertarian inclined, that Tea Party, libertarians, etc., that believe in limited government. Now, what is the choice? Well, you can support that group and try to have them prevail, and that's what I'm trying to persuade people here, because the optimum ideal, political ideal, to protect your individual rights is limited government. Now, they say it has no chance. Well, let me ask you this. When you have less than 1% of the people that believe in anarchism as the optimum way to protect your individual rights, what chance do you have? Absolutely much less, 20 times less. So since a limited government is progressing the situation in the direction that you want, which is no government, you should collaborate with the people that believe in limited government to at least try to achieve that. And then at that point, once we have a limited government, you can part company with us and say, we want no government, and you will have an ally in me who will respect your right to buy a property in some coastline part of the United States. You have enough people there, secede and try your anarchist experiment. But guess what? The people, the anarchists, are not interested. They say, I'm perfectly happy where I am now. But that's a contradiction, because they think that they're perfectly happy where they are now. They just don't want to pay taxes, or they just don't want this law to apply or this other law to apply. Well, you got to make up your mind. Either we have a government that's abusing our rights, or we don't. And if we have one that's abusing, you should try to retrench it, try to reduce it so that it abuses your rights less. It's like I said in the beginning, it's a matter of optimizing. It's a matter of getting closer to the ideal. Your natural allies are the people that believe in limited government, because we both agree that the present government is abusing our rights. And so let's join forces and try to retrench those violations and get closer to a limited government. That's my appeal to the anarchists. Now, there's been a few other things that I wanted to mention. As I was saying before, what?
You have 30 seconds.
That's it?
Yes, sir.
Well, one of the obvious premises that Victor and I disagree on is that people will always choose predation. And the point is that under a libertarian limited government, you can deal with predation much more effectively than you can in anarchism, because you can tolerate a lot of predation as long as they don't have a majority, and you can vote them down and put them in jail if they do predation. Whereas in anarchism, if you have 10% of the people that are interested in predation, there's no way to control them. That's one of the big problems with anarchism. And did you give me my extension?
Yes, I did. In fact, your time is up.
So I have four. I took.
4.5 minutes, actually. So your time is up.
Well, okay. Well, let's leave it at that. I had a few other things, but it's been a good debate, so let's not ruin it.
This is the conclusion of the show. We can't have this going. It's been going on for 2 hours now. We were aiming for an hour, so this is it.
Okay.
Now, since this is a podcast, I will sign out on my signature sign out slogan, which is to make an appeal to my viewers to like this video, to subscribe to the channel, to share this discussion that I've had with Jan Helfeld today. I'm sure that he will have it on his channel as well. But I ask my viewers to, by all means, share and subscribe to myself and Jan's station as well for other anarchist discussions that he does have. And this is Victor Pross signing out. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Victor. I'm going to stop the broadcast, okay?
Very good.